Hey gang, sorry if you hear that noise in the background. My AC is going because it is hot on the East Coast. But that's why I wanted to jump on here and talk to you guys ahead of this episode. Unfortunately, my audio in this interview is not great. We're not exactly sure what happened, but Mike has finally said, Liz, you can only record in the studio. So we're going to be doing that moving forward. So hopefully the audio, Mike's going to have it right there in house to tweak and to oversee all the issues. So hopefully we won't have this issue again. I want to go ahead and blame my cat for the problem. I don't know that I can put all of the blame on her, but I can definitely put most of the blame on her. So, but I didn't want to just scrap this interview because it is with two wonderful ladies, Kathy and Riya. And quite frankly, they're busy. I'm busy. You guys know it's hard enough for me to schedule myself and another person, let alone two other people. So I didn't want to miss out on the conversation that we had and have to kind of do a do-over whenever we could possibly get ourselves together again. And we are actually going to have the two ladies back in the future. We're going to be talking about their book that they've released. They have a second book coming out, so I would definitely want to have them back for that. They are both amazing and successful doctors, so we're probably going to have them on maybe even a third time for just pure doctor chat. You guys know I am fascinated with doctors and the human body in general, but I just, like I said, I really didn't, I feel really bad. I already apologized to Katie and Riya about the situation with the audio. They sound okay. It's all me. But I wanted to just put that out ahead of the episode so that you guys aren't like, ugh, what's wrong with producer Mike these days? It's not him. It was something going on my end, but we are going to fix it in the future. So again, thank you guys so much. And this is Try Not to Curse. Gang, welcome to another episode of Try Not to Curse. Elizabeth Marvel here with you. Now, guys, I have put myself in quite a predicament, and this is not the first time. It won't be the last time, but I can tell you now, if you are doing a podcast or any type of interview show, don't interview authors because you're going to have to read their book. Now, it's not a bad thing. I love this book, but it's one of those, like, every day I'm like, shit, I need to make sure I take some time to read the book. And I'm not a big reader. I think this is the first full book I've read this year. I'm like halfway through three others. But we are talking with Kathryn and Riya about the Romance RX. I have posted in the Facebook page. I've shared it on my Facebook page a couple of times already as well. It's a really nice, lighthearted, sweet romance novel, modern romance novel about two doctors who meet in residency. And I will say, you guys, it's the first book that I've ever read written by a doctor about doctory things. Like, I'm not a Grey's Anatomy person. I used to watch ER back in the day, but reading this and like hearing the lingo and Kathryn, you guys and Riya, you guys explain it really well. Like you do say in a couple of chapters, like, this is not what, how it is when they show you this on TV. That's not really what it is. And that's not what they call it. And that's not what we do. And just in speaking with Kyle in our last episode, she mentioned the if you hear hoof prints, you should be thinking zebras. And I was like, shut up, they say that in this thing that you're referring to. I thought it was so cool. I'm like, these guys are legit. We'll get into the book itself. Riya, if you guys wouldn't mind just telling my listeners what your doctor's in, what your medical background and focus is in, and then we'll get into the chat. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us. So my name's Kathryn, and I am a doctor in oncology, and specifically I specialize in breast oncology.
And I'm Riya, and I am also an oncologist, and I don't really have the specific focus. I do all pretty much general hematology and oncology. I like certain things more than others, but
Well, so for dum-dums like me, like what does oncology mean?
So oncology is the study of cancer.
Okay.
So we see all different types of cancer, solid tumors, like breast, colon, lung, but also what we call hematologic cancers, so like blood cancers, leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma.
Okay.
And then, but as part of our training, we also do hematology, and hematology is the study of blood. So we also see blood disorders that are not cancerous, like iron deficiency, just other anemias, elevated white count, low platelets.
Okay. And you're both based in New York. You work in New York. I should ask, so it does explain in the back of your book, it does explain that you are both avid readers of romance novels. But at what point did you guys sit down and think like, we could write one? Why don't we write one? And is it one of those like write what you know kind of things? It's like, well, we want to write a romance novel. So where do we get started? Okay, let's get started with two doctors coming together. And tell me about how all this came about.
Since we are doctors, in our training, there's a phrase that gets said a lot: see one, do one, teach one. Like you see something one time and then you do it one time. And then if you teach someone else one time, they're like, oh, now you know how to do it. And so after reading enough romance novels, which I actually had never read one until Kathryn got me into it. So
Okay.
After reading a few, we realized, romance novels are really comforting in a way, in that there are a lot of different tropes, and they're actually like very embraced. I think that we were like, well, we really feel like we understand, kind of like the formatting and things like that. And so we're like, oh, we could do this, but we could do this if it was about things that we know about, like doctors and doctory things.
Sure. Well, I will say I love romance novels. That's pretty much like what kept me interested in reading throughout high school and through college. Julie Garwood's one of my favorite authors. Joan Johnston is one of my favorite authors. If anyone's looking to get into romance novels, I would start with them. But they started off with like period westerns and like medieval, like lords and ladies, and then they gradually
like Regency romance.
It was Regency, but what I liked about their stories was that every one of the characters was somehow connected. Like 5 books later, it was like the ancestor of someone else or whatever. So that was kind of fun to like kind of catch up with the characters throughout time. But this is a modern romance, which I really dug, because I don't read, like I said, I don't read a lot of those. So the language was all very current. You refer to like some current musicians and stuff when they're talking about going on a run and listening to their iPods and things like that. But I will say, so what's interesting to me is the male protagonist, Quinn, is going into cardiology. The female protagonist, Dylan, she's going into, is it oncology, but with a focus on LGBTQ plus like medicine or patients. I don't know how you would explain it.
So she's not going into oncology. She is going into a specialized fellowship called just LGBTQ medicine, with a special emphasis on endocrinology, which is the study of hormones. Because people who are transgender need, hormone supplementation. So a lot of transgender patients will see endocrinologists. And this idea came to us. So it's not really a fellowship that is available. There is actually one hospital in New York City that has this fellowship, so we just sort of took that and ran with it.
Okay. Well, so I was going to ask though, because again, you guys are in different fields. How much research did you have to do? Because there's a lot of medical lingo in here. There's a lot of terminology that I would assume is very specific to those types of fields and medical expertise. So did you have to, go to other, fellow doctors and say, hey, does this sound right? Are we using the right term? Is this where this, what this diagnosis would come out like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that because we, do work in multidisciplinary fields, like, for us, we're working with surgeons and radiation oncologists and in the hospital, like internal medicine people all the time. We definitely had an idea, but we also have a lot of friends in different specialties that were happy to weigh in on the way that we were representing other fields.
Okay. And how
also,
much? Go ahead.
Sorry, the two characters are in internal medicine residency. right? So, and we both did internal medicine residency. In order to specialize in hematology and oncology fellowship, you still have to do a residency in internal medicine. So what they're going through is something that we have been through, so we knew enough, medicine to be able to make it convincing. But we definitely did some research. Some things from residency I've like totally forgotten about. The scene about the causes of pancreatitis. I had to look that up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, I mean, the other part of it where they're thinking, they're in residency, but they're also thinking about their futures and applying to fellowship and how competitive that is. We've both been through that. So we've both been like, oh, we have to like get our next step in training.
Right. Well, so that was going to be the next thing I was going to ask was how much of these characters' experiences did you take from your own? Because they talk about, they're in a residency and a fellowship where mental health is very important and taking time for yourself, taking those mental health breaks. They do a couple of activities as a group, all of the residents. They go on a scavenger hunt. They do some team building things. Did you experience a lot of that when you were coming up in the medical field?
A little bit.
Yeah, but not like this.
Not like this.
I think it's more of how we would like things to be as opposed to how things are.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I was on board with all of it. It all sounded really nice to me.
I mean, physician burnout is like a topic that's discussed a lot in a lot of places. And unfortunately, there's a lot of mental health issues in the healthcare provider in general community. Like, I think that a lot of healthcare providers, like, physicians, PAs, NPs, like nurses, everyone really, especially like in a post-COVID world, I think that there should be a lot of focus on mental health.
Well, we did talk about that with Sarah back in season 1, and we're talking about veterinarians in particular. The suicide rate is very high with them. I actually just saw the film Asphalt City with Sean Penn, and Mike Tyson was randomly in it, by the way, too. He was amazing. But that is all. It follows FDNY EMS ambulance drivers, and you see the abuse that they take on, the horrific things that they see, the challenges that they face when trying to attend to people, on site somewhere, and maybe there's a large crowd and they're getting screamed at, and it's kind of a dangerous situation. So it's the whole film itself was like extremely stressful to sit there and watch. So it does give you a really good perspective of the kinds of things that you guys have to go through on an everyday basis, like just simply trying to save someone's life. It's pretty unbelievable. So I applaud you guys for wanting to share all of that and kind of highlight how important it is to think about your mental health and to look after yourself in that regard. So Kathryn, you were explaining to me that you guys self-published this. You did not go to a publishing house. You did not shop this around. You just said, we're going to put this out there. And if people buy it, great. The kind of like how I started with this podcast. If people listen, awesome. If not, it's, I'm doing it for me. So what were the challenges of self-publishing? And when you finally put something together, I mean, how many drafts did you go through? I always hear horror stories of like, the story starts out one way and then it's completely another way by the time it's published. So give us a little info about that.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely went through a lot of drafts, but it wasn't like, a first draft and then a second draft. It was just like continuous editing for, I think like 8 to 10 months, we would look at chapter 1 and then we would move on to chapter 2 and then we'd go back to chapter 1 and then just, it was constant. Yeah. And we would do it together. So like she'd look at that
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Google Docs is a great thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Everything was on Google Docs. Like she'd look at a chapter and then after she was done looking at it, I jump in and look at it. And then it was just this constant back and forth.
And did one of you, so like writers for like TV and movies, for example, like usually each character, like there's one specific writer for like that character. Did one of you write for Quinn and one of you write for Dylan, or did you just, like you said, just kind of share notes back and forth?
So one of us, and I mean, not that you know us, so you wouldn't be able to really guess, but sometimes like my friends who've read the book, I'm like, you should guess which one I wrote and which one my partner wrote. Yeah, so one of us wrote one character, one of us wrote the other, but we both edited everything. So like after Kathryn did her first draft of a chapter, then I would go back and I'd edit it, and then she'd look at it again. And then I would then use that to move on. And we did write it relatively sequentially so that we could build upon the other chapters. Plus it works for scheduling because, we're both doctors and moms.
Sure.
And we're like, oh, when she's done, that's when I'll jump back in.
Well, and I should point out as well, which I love that you do this, because most romance novels do not. It's always from one particular character's perspective. So every chapter, you guys go back and forth between the two. So Quinn gets a chapter, then Dylan gets a chapter, and vice versa. And I love that because it is nice to hear, both sides of the story and see how both characters, begin to develop feelings for one another. From both sides of their perspective. It's really, really sweet. So, okay, you sit down, you say, we're going to write a romance novel. Now, was it awkward writing the love scenes and the, did you use a lot of the classic romance terminology for body parts and for, talk about throbbing and pumping and all that good stuff. I'm just sitting here and I'm like, oh yeah, they've definitely read romance novels before. I have seen all of these words. I love it. But so how awkward was that to be like, hey, so I wrote this chapter, and kind of having to review one another's love scene.
So I think that is the question that I get asked the most from my friends.
Yeah.
And, honestly, it wasn't awkward at all.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Riya and I are very close. We've been friends for many years. We talk about everything and anything. And I think we're both pretty open, sexually, meaning like we're comfortable talking about sexuality. Sure. I really think that, our generation really paved the way for women to be open about their sexuality and their feelings.
That's awesome. No, I totally respect and appreciate that for sure. And
that being said, I still have not told my parents about this book.
In the back of the book as well, you guys are like, we appreciate all the love and support from our family, grandma and grandpa. Please do not read this. Mom and dad, please do not read this. Like, just acknowledge that we wrote a book and move along. Like, don't tell the aunties. I thought that was great. That was, I said that in our episode with Elena. I started off by saying, like, Mom, I'm glad you're listening. Don't talk to me about this afterwards. So, so I totally understand that sentiment. Okay, so how does one self-publish? Like what? Because I have a couple of friends who have self-published their books as well, but we haven't had that conversation. So where do you go? Who do you contact? How do you settle on it? Because there's a cover and there's cover art and this is a substantial book. How many pages are we looking at here? Hold on. 432 pages. Well, I'll tell you, I ordered it and then I got it in the mail and I was like, oh damn, like they're serious. Like this is a real book. That's awesome. And what was that? How did you make that decision to self-publish, to not bother sending it into different publishing houses?
So, we did query a little bit. And I think that ultimately it probably wasn't the best route for us for a few reasons. I think that we're not full-time authors. And so I think that doing things kind of like on our own timeline and on our own schedule was helpful to us. And then also like you get a lot of creative control when you self-publish. Like sure. We hired a cover artist. We, went through drafts of the cover, formatting, same thing, so I think that it worked for us for that reason. And, we did have, we also like, there's acknowledgments in the book. We hired an editor to help us because obviously like that's important, and grammar and punctuation. So
I too, normally you can pick out, like you can see a mistake here or there or whatever, like, oh, they meant this word instead of that. Didn't have any of that, you guys. Nothing.
I learned I'm old and I double space and I shouldn't double space anymore. That is what I learned.
We don't do that anymore.
Process. I was like, what do you mean? Like I had to find and replace like all of my double spacing throughout the whole book.
it happens. Oh my God, that's so funny. So again, how, did you go to a printing press? Like I don't know. So I will say I have toyed with the idea of writing a romance novel specifically as well. Cause again, same thing. It's what I like. It's what I'm comfortable with. There's not a whole lot of drama. I mean, you could have that. You could make it like a mystery romance kind of thing too. You could do that, but
I would like to read more of those. So I think you should do it because there's not a lot out there, and I'd love to read more mystery romances.
I'm telling you, Julie Garwood and Joan Johnston I think definitely Julie Garwood. I would start with them because there's a lot of like half of the men are like spies or they like somehow like get embroiled with like some like, it's like wartime or whatever. So I think you would like those. Those are pretty good. There's always like there's like a catch to a lot of the stuff there. But yeah, maybe. I mean, who knows? But so again,
absolutely.
Yeah. So again, okay, so I've written this book, and then what? Like how does your writing become an actual tangible bound book? I mean, I got mine on Barnes and Noble. You can get it on Amazon, you can get it on Kindle. How does all of that come about?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, going into this, we had no idea, 0 cents, right?
Yeah.
We've never written a book before. I don't have any friends who are authors. Because like our friend circle is, oncologists, right? Other
right.
doctors,
the occasional other doctor for fun.
right, exactly. Or it's
those
like
diversity friends,
Yeah. Our kids' friends' parents, right? That's like our friend circle.
Yeah.
So no authors. And then, we started by joining a group called Physician Women Writers.
Oh,
and it was like a little bit helpful. There were a few women who have self-published. I don't know if you've heard of Frida McFadden. She is also a physician. She writes thrillers.
Okay.
And she's in that group, and occasionally we'll talk about her self-publishing journey. So I found that a little bit helpful. So essentially, the main platform that people use is called Kindle Direct Publishing.
Okay.
So we hired a person obviously for editing, but then we also hired somebody else for like formatting. She also made the cover design, but then formatted, the pages inside, formatted the back cover as well, and how the book is going to come together. And then you just upload all of these files onto Kindle Direct Publishing. You set a price, and then you're good to go. And that's it.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And is this on Audible?
No. So
okay.
I looked into like audiobook narrators, because we're doing this ourselves, we have to like front the money. And it costs, I think, like $100 to $300 an hour for a narrator. Wow. Yeah. And I mean, this is not our like primary job.
Right.
So, yeah. We're just doing this for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, losing $1,000 here and there is no big deal. But, we don't want to put too much time and effort into an audiobook, as great as that might be.
I mean, maybe one day, because they even do like where there are multiple narrators. Like, so you would have somebody read the part of Dylan, you would have somebody read the part of Quinn, and then all the subsequent side characters as well. I think that would be really fun. That would sound great audibly. So maybe one day. And I did get Kathryn
listening.
Yeah.
And wants to narrate our book.
I'll happily help narrate. I would love to narrate. I can read all day. But Kathryn, I had asked you specifically when I was going to order the book, I was like, where's the best place? Like, what is more bang for your buck? Like, where are you guys going to benefit me ordering from? So, I think you said Kindle. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we get paid the most for the Kindle version. That's because from the Kindle version, Amazon just takes its commission, which I think is like 30%.
Okay.
But for the paperback version, we have to pay for the printing cost, which for a book that length comes out to be like $6 to $7. Right. And then Amazon takes like another 30%. So like currently on Amazon, it's the paperback is listed at $10.99. And I think like our royalty from a $10.99 sale is like $1.
Well, again, I apologize because I did get the physical copy. I got mine through Barnes and Noble, so I don't know how that all pans out. But
I prefer physical copies of books also. I totally get it.
Yeah, it's just because and I explain this to people all the time who always try to turn me on to podcasts and stuff. I'm like, my job is not one in which where I can have the radio on or have a podcast playing in the background. And it's the same thing. Like I'm not in a position where I can like sit with a Kindle or whatever. So it's like, this, I go on walks around my neighborhood every afternoon, and it's also really strange, you guys. I have really bad motion sickness. So like, I can't play on my phone. I really can't even watch movies like in a car or anything. But for some reason I can walk and read and I have no problem. So this has been great. So I take my walks and I'm just doing laps and I'm just going chapter through chapter through chapter. It's awesome. But it's a lot easier for me with this than with a Kindle and, all that other good stuff. So, because, batteries die and all that kind of thing. So I love a physical copy. I am going to be sharing this with my mother. I'm going to let her borrow it because I think she'll dig it as well. Unless maybe I should buy her own copy now that I'm talking to you about it. I'm not trying to take money out of your pocket.
No. You don't need to buy it.
This is not our primary way of putting food on the table.
That's the whole point. Again, so it's called The Romance RX by Kathryn and Riya. And I dig it. Even if and this is the thing that's crazy too, like people always have this perception of like romance novels. Like it's not full bore sex from page one. Like and you guys, again, I love this. You followed like the classic romance, like I don't even think it gets sexual until like halfway through. But then, of course, once they do it one time, forget about it. It's like every other, which is great. Again, very much like a regular relationship. So even if you're not a fan of romance novels, I think you would dig this book. When I posted about it on Facebook, I was like, if you like Grey's Anatomy, you're going to love that, because it is still very much about medical jargon and medical situations and hospital drama. And I love that about it too. Have you guys thought about a sequel, perhaps? Like, what's going on with Miley and her life? What about Luna's journey? Like, we can get into all of that good stuff. Maybe Grandpa Jim meets a nice lady at the diner. You don't know.
We have, in fact, and we actually, I think both of us really enjoy reading those interconnected standalone series where, each book stands alone and you don't have to read all of them, but like the subsequent books do have characters that have been introduced in previous books. And so we have actually begun writing a second book.
Yay!
So there have been more challenges, I think, just with us and the second book. I think it's like, when musical artists have like a sophomore slump or something, like, it's easy the first time, like you've never done this before, every idea is new, everything is great, and then the second time around you're like, wait, like, is this too similar, or like what should I do here? And so I think that we've definitely experienced those challenges, and it hasn't like flown from the fingertips quite the same way, but we are like a decent way through a first draft, and I think it would be a shame for us to abandon it, so we're probably going to just power through and make it happen.
Cool. I love that. And so you also state in the book that both of your husbands read your first drafts initially. And I would imagine neither of them have read romance novels before or have any interest. But so what was their feedback like, especially, with the sexy parts? What was their feedback about those things?
Mostly my husband was like confused about the terminology. He was like,
oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, like, he of course he knew what everything meant, but like word choices. He was like, why would you use that word? I'm like, because that's the word that's always used.
Right. Yeah. Well, because you still want to make it, sugarcoat. You want to make it still romantic. It's not just, raw, dirty, down and dirty sex. You still want to make it, nice and
Right.
tender.
And we also don't want to make it like medical.
Yeah.
Like we can,
Sure.
yeah, you can use the medical terms, but nobody wants to read that.
Yeah. This isn't a sex ed book. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
My husband actually had more my husband's a physician also, and so he actually had more commentary on the medically parts of it, he was like, oh, like how likely is that, like wouldn't it be more likely to do this? I was like, yes, but that's sadder and this is a happy book.
Yeah,
I was
fair.
like, we want to be like realistic, but realistic in the best case scenario way.
Right. Well, and I mean, and again, for me, like, you know, like I said, I'm not really big on medical dramas and things. And I think a lot of it is because I'm one of those people that, like, if they start talking about symptoms or whatever, like, oh my God, I think I have that. Like, oh, I think, you know, I just can't, for my own mental health. I just can't do it. Well, funnily enough, as I mentioned to you both before we started the interview, one of your characters deals with something very similar to what one of my family members is going through. And I was like, holy shit. I'm like, what are the odds? You know, so it's just, it happens. It's out there. So you guys are both, you know, Kathryn, you said you're on call right now. What is your schedule like? So here your characters talk about there are night floats, and then you're doing work in specific fields and specific hospitals, and you're, you know, visiting residencies and those kinds of things. Now that you are established in your field, what's your everyday schedule like?
It's definitely not as crazy as it was during residency. You know, like the portrayal of the residency hours was very much like my residency and Ria's residency as well. You know, we had day shifts and then a night float, and then doing like specialty rotations in all the different, you know, internal medicine specialties, cardiology, oncology, endocrine, and then a lot of like shifts in the hospital, and then also having your own medicine clinic, which Dylan talks about when she sees Dr. Ahmed, you know, after he gets, not Dr. Ahmed, Mr. Ahmed, after he gets discharged from the hospital, you know, she sees him in her clinic, you know, so we had things like that. But now, you know, and in residency, when you were on call, you were like physically at the hospital. So
Right.
now it's different. You know, I'm on call right now, and obviously, you know, I'm not in the hospital. I'm sitting in, you know, office at home. You know, so I just wait for my, you know, to get a text message if anything comes through. And then, you know, during the week that I'm on call, I'm also in the hospital. So I'm seeing patients that are admitted, and we are what we call consultants. So, you know, the patient will be admitted to a primary team, usually an internal medicine team. And then if they have something wrong with them, either, you know, blood-wise, hematologically, or a new diagnosis of cancer, or they're one of our patients that we see at the Cancer Institute, then, you know, they call us to manage those issues, you know. So a patient could be admitted for like a COPD exacerbation, you know, but maybe their platelet count is low. So then they call us to come, you know, talk about the platelets. Yeah.
Okay.
And then aside from being in the hospital, then the other weeks, you know, I'm just in the office and I see the patients who come, you know, into the office, and those are usually like non-stressful visits, you know, patients that are doing well, you know, and, you know, just making sure that everything's okay. You know, see you in 6 months.
Well, and so again, as we mentioned, you're on call right now, but obviously you don't always have to go to the hospital when someone calls you. They're just calling you for a consult or give you an update. How often is it one of those situations where you're just, okay, hey, I got to go. You grab your keys and you're out the door?
Yeah,
it's
so
not
one
often.
of the reasons, yeah,
it's not often, but I mean, there are certain things that will, you know, get us even like in the middle of the night out of the bed and into the hospital. Like, and in our field, like if we're worried someone has like an acute leukemia and we need to look at their blood smear, like immediately, then that's something that would get us out of bed. Or same thing, like there are specific low platelet problems that are emergencies that we would be like, oh, we really need to go look at their blood smear. We need to go in. And then, you know, certain like pregnancy complications, we're like, oh no, that really needs like personal attention now. So there are definitely things that get us out of bed and into the hospital.
it makes when thinking of on call, the first recollection I have of things like that is like watching the Cosby Show, which I know no one ever wants to talk about anymore, but that was my, as a little kid, he would get the phone call in the middle of the night or whatever. Okay, how far apart are the contractions? All right, I'm coming, whatever. So that's always what I think of whenever I hear on call. It's like, oh, the phone's ringing. All right, it's go time. We've got to get to action. So that makes for an exciting day. I would imagine, every day is different for you, which is always good and keeps you on your toes. But have you
before we got started, you had mentioned how you liked ER back in the day, and so ER is actually is pretty realistic, but ER is realistic in that if you took every exciting thing that happened in an emergency room in a year and you crammed it into an hour, that's what ER is like. It's very realistic. It's just so condensed with action.
I was going to ask you about that. So again, I don't always watch medical shows. I just happened the other night. I was at my best friend's house and they're just flipping through and we were watching an episode of The Good Doctor. And it was like somebody had crashed their vehicle into a crowd of people. So it was like everybody was they had red tag, black tag, yellow.
They were like they were triaging the patients with tags because they were in the field. Yeah.
So it seemed just like classic ER. It was chaotic and everybody's coming in and we need this right now and he's gotta wait and hold your, So there was one scene. I've got to ask about this because again, I understand the logic behind it, but coming from somebody who I would be the patient. So there's one scene where a guy, his leg was all messed up. And the one surgeon had said, I can do this procedure. We can save his leg. And the whoever was in charge of the situation said, no, that's a 6-hour procedure. And you can see 4 other patients in that time. Amputate the leg, take the leg, gotta go. We don't have time for that. And I thought to myself, I was like, if I was that patient, and I knew, I was told later on that they could have actually saved my leg rather than removing it. Like, that's a lawsuit, I would think. I don't know. I mean, does that sound like a real, I understand you have to weigh, you know what I mean? Like, if it comes to potentially saving 5 people's lives or you losing a leg, obviously what's the right answer here? But is that a realistic situation? Is that a realistic decision that has to be made during a big catastrophic event like that, when you're short staffed and you're just overwhelmed with people all of which are in critical condition to some degree?
I mean, I can see how it could happen. The only it doesn't happen often, I'm sure.
Right. Sure.
Right. But
I would hope not.
Yeah, in the scenario, like when you were talking about that I can imagine it happening is that, some of that happened during COVID, right? When the hospitals were inundated and, if a patient came into the emergency room and, they knew they were going to die, right? They would send them home to die, right? And then if, there were 3 patients who needed a ventilator and the hospital only had 2 ventilators, right? It's going to go to the 2 people who are younger and healthier, who could come out of it, so some of that did happen, during COVID. Yeah. So yes, it can, but, hopefully, I think there usually are enough resources where, things like that don't happen. But again, in like a mass casualty, I can see it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think either one of us, we're not the specialties that would ever have to know about that or make those decisions. So I don't think we have any personal knowledge of whether or not that would actually happen. But same kind of thing, there were all these seminars on can we split ventilators between 2 people in COVID? And then there were all these simulations. They're like, no, that doesn't work. You just have to pick a person. So I mean, obviously, if those kinds of decisions have to be made, though, I don't think it would be in that Good Doctor scene where one person decides that. That would never happen. I think that in those situations, there are ethics committees within the hospitals that have multiple people on them. And so no one person is unilaterally making a decision like that. That would never happen. But
well, and all of these hospitals have legal teams as well that I'm sure they would consult with us in addition to that too, which is why I'm asking these questions, just because, it's I've had my chiropractor on the show a couple of times, but it's always exciting when I can get somebody else's, expertise and opinion on things like that. Because I'm a part of the emergency response team at my job. And one of the things that we're trained right away is not to sound glib about it, but we come first. So when we're running into a situation, if it potentially becomes a situation that is in addition to whatever's already happened, if it becomes dangerous for us, we have to get out of there, because you don't want to add to the casualty count, right? So it's that. So I see these different scenarios, and I think about like how based in reality could they possibly be. So that's just why I wanted to ask that question, because I'm just fascinated by the whole thing. And we've been talking a lot. So I've had Fiona on, I've had Robin on, I've had Kyle on. We're gonna be talking with Caitlin. I have some friends that have been on this show it's taken them decades to get a proper medical diagnosis for the various things that they've had come up in their lives. And the last thing that Kyle and I spoke about on our last episode was about how you just have to continue to advocate for yourself, right? If it seems like you're not getting the response or the, I wouldn't say the answers you're looking for, because you're looking for, you don't know what the answer is, right? If you're in the process of trying to find out what's going on with you. But I was wondering from your perspective, and whether or not you have any of this experience, or if you've seen anything like this. Because I said to Kyle, I said, what would be really great is if someone like yourself, who has been going through this she's now 42. It took her 20 years to get a proper diagnosis and finally on the path to treatment. It would be great if you could go to a medical conference and sit down in front of a group of doctors and share your story, so that maybe some doctors out there can realize what they're doing wrong. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because they're not to, and please, I do not believe either of you are doctors like that, where you're, but it seems like a lot of the time, especially with women, as I'm sure we're told, just lose weight. It's anxiety. You're doing too much. Take a weekend off. And that's, you know what I mean? Like, it's all in your head. Like poor Kyle was told that. Fiona's been told that time and time again. That you don't really have these symptoms. You're not really experiencing what you say you're going through. And I just think that if there was a place where these patients could sit down in front of doctors and share their story and say, all it took was one person to believe me, one person to do the work. And granted, some of this stuff is very specialized. Kyle had even said, the doctor that she was finally led to knew of what was going on because that was part of their field. It was gastroenterology. But I'm just wondering if that's something that's ever been done that you've heard of before, because I know Caitlin has sat down and shared her story in front of some physicians, but I don't know that that's something that's regularly done. And I just think that it would be a real asset moving forward in the future. You know what I mean? If doctors could get that understanding and see it from a patient's eyes of the kind of things they go through, just to simply get some answers. I know that's I was rambling a lot there. I apologize.
I don't know if there are any like conferences, but sometimes unfortunately, like, medicine doesn't even have the answer. And yes, you're absolutely right about women, people not believing women's symptoms. We know that a hysterectomy is called a hysterectomy because they're trying to cut out the hysteria in women. Which is wild. So, we do see these patients, I'd say often, and then they come to us to like make sure it's not like a blood cancer, make sure it's not a cancer. But beyond, but once we rule that out, I'm not able to make a diagnosis. I'm like, I can tell you what it's not, but I can't tell you what it is.
Sure.
Riya, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the same thing. And then I mean, sometimes some of the stuff that we do specifically as hematology oncology is misunderstood. So sometimes someone will come to us and they're like, "Oh, this is abnormal in my blood," and I was like, I totally understand that this is an abnormal blood value. It's just that blood value is not related to your bone marrow. And so it's not necessarily something that I know how to handle. I mean, it looks like it's a marker of inflammation, and there's like a lot of different things that can cause inflammation. So, we do need to figure out what's causing that inflammation, but like, just because it's a blood test doesn't mean it's a blood doctor problem. And the truth is we did do a lot of years of specialty training for our specialties. And I think that's like a healthcare thing. I think that there are so many subspecialists and everyone's done so much training in their subspecialty that there's not a lot of big picture people. Like internists are big picture people, right? And they have to coordinate all the subspecialists and they need to know a little bit about everything. And so if you don't have a really good internist, then obviously it can be harder to make diagnoses because like Kathryn said, like, I can tell you it's not this because this is what I do every day. But like, there's a lot of other things that it could be. And so, short of going to every specialty and ruling things out, it's very difficult unless you have a very good big picture person to kind of help navigate all of that.
Sure. So I just wanted to bring that up because, go ahead.
Sorry. So my favorite medical show is House.
Okay.
And,
and I'm like, is that a real thing? A Dr. House?
So, I mean, and like, he was a big picture person, right? He could look at the patient from like every angle and figure out the diagnosis. We're coming at it from like, one direction, so, we can figure out a diagnosis if it's cancer, but beyond that, we're the wrong people.
If you remember, I watched a lot of House in medical school, actually. If you remember, he had a team and each person on his team was from a different specialty. So like one character was a neurologist, one character was an endocrinologist. And so he basically made this diagnostician team and it had people from different specialties because and then he was like the big picture coordinator. So it was kind of like a microcosm of real life, but like better than real life, obviously, because it's a TV show. So basically he had a team of specialists that helped him figure things out. And he was the big picture person. And this is the first time actually I'm realizing that's kind of realistic because like, when I was watching it, I was like, this is not how things are. But it's realistic if you take what we do, you shrink it down and you make it way better. But not that this was a question. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you that too. Who seems to be the most accurate as far as
Scrubs? Have you ever seen Scrubs?
I'm obsessed with Scrubs. Please, I love that show. I love
Scrubs is the most accurate medical show that I have ever seen.
That's amazing. Well, and that one,
except for those musical episodes, like we don't break into song.
I mean, that's fair. Right. But they did. I mean, they did have on. It is supposed to be a comedy, but they did have that one episode in particular that showed how easily. And I mean, this is pre-COVID and all that. But just showed how easily germs can be spread from one person to another, like by simply like one guy picked up a used tissue off the floor and then shook somebody's hand who was very ill. And then they put their hand to their mouth and they showed you, they used like a green blob like graphic to show how the germ was being spread from one person to the next and that kind of thing. And it's one of those like until somebody breaks it down to you in the most simplistic way, like talk to me like I'm a child. You really don't think about it. You know what I mean? And then you get a visual like that and it's like, yeah, I'm going to start washing my hands more.
I mean, I loved Scrubs because I don't think I watched it all the way to completion because life and things are never as good at the end as they are in the beginning. But I think that, in the beginning, like all that fear and anxiety that an intern has is real. And, needing to find who your mentors are going to be, real. I think that there's just, finding your people in the hospital to survive all that trauma, real. But they did it in a humorous way, because I think doctors all, not all, but I mean, I would say a lot of us, and Kathryn and I, we have sometimes dark senses of humor, because you have to find a way to cope with everything you're seeing.
Right,
and so
exactly. Yeah.
it was a humorous show that had a lot of realistic elements, but handled in a way that let you wake up and come back to work the next day.
Right. I have questions, but they're all jumbled in my brain. This is the problem when you're doing all these off the cuff interviews, because you guys know I don't prepare for shit. But let's ask, why did you get into the medical field in the first place? What drew you to that? Because it's stressful AF, and Lord knows I didn't like school to begin with, let alone, that's a lot of school. It's a lot of shit you need to know, and you need to be right there with it, because we're talking life and death here. So what drew you guys to that?
I mean, I think I can speak for both of us in that we really liked school. I mean, it
was what I was good at.
Yeah, exactly.
That's okay.
Me too. I've always liked school, elementary school, middle school. I definitely enjoyed high school. I had so much fun in college, and I think we, like Riya said, we're good at it. And so what were you going to do? You just keep doing more school, so you just find the path where you can, go to school forever, which is essentially what we did.
Have you ever seen that TikTok trend? There's a TikTok trend where they're if you're the oldest or firstborn child of, sure. And then we both happen to be the children of immigrant parents, and you were told you were gifted in the 90s and you were high achieving. How's that career in healthcare treating you? Well, that is. It's a TikTok trend for a reason.
Yeah. If you weren't going to be doctors, you were going to be lawyers. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think I would be very good at that.
Oh, no? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I would be fine at it. I debated in high school. I would be fine at being a lawyer, but I think that, at the time I was oh no, this is what I'll do.
That's okay.
Any way of thinking ahead to law school? What did people do to get into law school? I had a path for med school, I could make in biology, right? Take my pre-med classes. And so it was outlined more clearly, right? I wouldn't have known what to major in if I wanted to go to law school. I still don't know what people major in. I guess you can major in anything.
Anything. Right. My husband's a doctor and he majored in history. I don't know.
Hey, I majored in sculpture with a minor in art history, and I have a podcast and I work in a factory. So,
Yeah. I don't know how many of those hours of organic chem lab apply to my daily life now. So
that's right. That's fair. Absolutely. Well, so just because we get on this subject often when talking anything medical, how much does insurance suck and tie your hands when you're trying to go after things for patients? And Ria's already, she's already shaking her head. How much harder do they make life for everybody? And why? And why? Do we know why? Is there a realistic explanation as to why they make life so much harder for everyone when all we're trying to do is just get better? And
the system's broken.
Wouldn't it be great if we could prolong our lives through the medical discoveries? And I'm thinking from an insurance standpoint, the longer I'm alive, the longer I'm paying your damn premiums. Hello. So approve everything. Let me get all the tests. What's the problem here?
I mean, so we're oncologists, and the drugs we prescribe are extraordinarily expensive, and that's a whole other problem. I don't know how much most of the things I prescribe are, just because I don't pay for them. But I think that they are they are magnitudes higher than anyone would expect. And so things are expensive, and insurance companies are, I believe, I don't even know if this is true, but a lot of them are for-profit businesses, I think.
Yeah.
And so
I think so too.
yeah. And so it is, unfortunately, the worst thing is when you have to get on the phone as a doctor and tell another doctor why you need something covered. And it's like, so once you go through all the normal steps, if the insurance company denies something, and then I, as a physician, think, no, I really need this for my patient, I then have to like get on the phone with the insurance company's doctor, and I have to tell them why I actually really need this for my patient. And they have like a little script and a little algorithm that they follow, and they ask me questions. And if I somehow say the wrong thing, but I don't have the script, I don't know what the right and wrong things are. And so if I say the wrong thing, they're like, no.
I can understand that safeguarding to a degree, because we don't want another opioid crisis. We don't want, fentanyl getting into the wrong hands. That I understand. But when you're talking about such specific drugs, such specific treatments and testing, like, I'm not asking for this because I just felt like fucking around with a patient one day, or I just had some free time and I thought I'd add some work to my plate. Like, so that's what's crazy to me about the whole thing. Mark Summers, if y'all will remember from Double Dare fame and the Food Network show Unwrapped, he was recently in an interview because he's doing a one-man show off Broadway right now that I'm hoping to see. But he says I think he said he had lymphoma 3 times and was finally put on a medication that seems to be keeping it under wraps and keeping it from having a flare-up or whatever, however you call it. But his medication is $1,500 a month. And I don't know how much his insurance covers for all of that kind of thing, but it's big business keeping people alive, and that really sucks. and I don't understand it. I don't know how doctors can do their jobs with their hands being tied so regularly. Do we think this is going to change anytime? I mean, so what are your opinions of like, like the NHS, like universal healthcare? Like, everybody's got their feelings on that, but being in the medical field, you guys, I mean, not to say that you're working in England or in Australia or what have you, but have you, I mean, we've all heard the horror stories, but then all the positives as well. Do you think something like that could work in this country, or do you just think we're just too used to things being the way that they are, and we're not going to make any type of positive change in that regard?
I mean, I think both of us are definitely for universal healthcare. The only issue is that, I hear complaints from, countries that have universal healthcare, Canada, the UK, where like the wait times can be long. But I don't know, I think the wait times here are long too, like,
well, we're short-staffed like crazy. I mean, I keep hearing that one of these very soon, there's going to be a serious nursing shortage. And then what are we going to do?
Right. And like, we see it already, there's an oncologist shortage, for like the past 2 years, we've been trying to hire 2 more oncologists. And so if you know an oncologist, let me know, but we can't find any. And then, we of course live in a part of the country where the cost of living is the highest. Right. And then unfortunately, the physicians who live here, are not paid the most because, everybody wants to live here, right? This is, the Northeast is the, best part of the country. But right. So like an oncologist, can go to Alaska and make, $1 million a year. I mean, Alaska is beautiful, so maybe that's not a bad option. But so yeah, it's hard. So as you were talking, I looked up Mark Summers to see what he has. Okay. And he has CLL, which is a type of leukemia, stands for chronic lymphocytic leukemia. And previously we used chemotherapy to treat, these types of leukemias. In more recent years, I'd say in the last 5 years, we still use an infusional medication called rituximab, which is probably $10,000 a dose.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you said he's on a pill. So my guess is maybe he's on something like venetoclax, or he's on a medication called ibrutinib.
Or acalabrutinib.
Yeah, exactly. And any of those would be, again, like you said, $15,000 a month, which is totally normal for our oncology medications. The oncology has moved so fast in the last 5 to 10 years, and new medications come out, on like a monthly basis. And because of that, there are no generic versions of any of these medications. Rituximab, yes, there's a generic, but the other medications that he could potentially be on, the venetoclax, the ibrutinib, the acalabrutinib,
like at least $600 a day for acalabrutinib, like right, if you're paying out of pocket. Yeah.
So we count on the insurance companies to pay for it. And then, so for instance, like acalabrutinib, maybe that's the one that his oncologist wanted him to be on. And then his insurance company probably came back and said, no, he has to try ibrutinib first. Right. It's always things like that, like the insurance tries to dictate, what medications we can put patients on. Yeah. And as Riya was saying earlier, sometimes we have to get on the phone and talk to a doctor that works at the insurance company, but most of these doctors that work at the insurance company are not oncologists. So I'm like, you should not be dictating, what I want to do, but it's the nature of.
So we're oncologists, right? And we're in America. And so we have like these guidelines called NCCN, which is like the United States National Cancer Network guidelines. And it's algorithmic, it's evidence-based, and therefore you would think that anything in those guidelines should not be an issue. I have literally on the phone been like, I had to have the NCCN guidelines up on my computer, and I was like, well, if you look at, and then they don't have page numbers. They have very weird numbers at the bottom. So it's like NCCN dash this number 43. And I'm like reciting the slide number to the person to be like, but it's there. And they're like, well, is it this case or this case? I was like, it doesn't matter because it's listed under both cases. and he's like, okay, but which one is it? I was like, it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, I remember after I had my bariatric surgery, they were putting me on a medication just, for heartburn, for acid reflux. And she had said to me, the nurse had said, she goes, so we're going to prescribe you omeprazole, but it could be something else. It could be this, it could be that. It's whatever the insurance decides they're going to offer up. But she goes, but it's the exact same thing. So I don't understand why they put us through this. And I see that so often and time again. But also on the other end of it, I have a very good insurance policy. I pay into an HSA. I also pay into an FSA. And for the past 4 months, I haven't mentioned this on the pod yet, but for the past 4 months, I've been trying to get access to my FSA funds. I just filed a claim. I purchased some items, X, Y, and Z. I had to go through all of these hoops. I had to prove that I had hit my deductible in order for the account to be switched over to some kind of classification, whatever. Then I needed a doctor's note. And it just was on and on and on. They kept denying the claim. Come to find out, it was because of a clerical error, like 4 months ago, that they just didn't check a box in order to pay me out. But every time I would call them and they would say I've been denied, I would say to them, okay, so what doctor are you talking to? And they said, well, we don't have a doctor in our office. I said, well, you've asked me to provide a doctor's note, which I've done. So I'd like to know what doctor it is that you're speaking to that feels that what my doctor is telling you is incorrect. You know what I mean? Like, these are the stupid kinds of games that they make us play. So it's just, and again, I can imagine as frustrating as it is as a patient, it's got to be as equally frustrating for coming from you, the experts, who are like, no, I'm their doctor. I know what I'm looking at. I know what they need. and you're the roadblock between, taking care of my people. So the whole thing's just so ridiculous.
Yeah. So we actually see a lot of patients who have had bariatric surgery, because after bariatric surgery, there's decreased absorption of iron and B12, so we're often giving, IV iron in the office, B12 injections, and the iron authorization is, a pain in my ass every single time. There's one iron formulation that's 2 doses 1 week apart, right? So we generally try to use that one. We don't want patients coming into the office so often, right? Everybody has a life.
Yeah.
And then insurance is like, no, we're not going to pay for that one. We're only going to pay for the iron that's a lower dose, and they have to come in 5 times. I'm like, who the fuck has time to come in five times,
No one, and they
once
know
a week
that.
for 5 weeks? Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But also it's not just the insurance companies, like the hospitals also, to get better pricing on these drugs so that they can manage to buy them, will also have certain preferred drugs. So I need to know what the patient's insurance company preferred drug is. I need to know what my hospital's preferred drug is. I need to know how much chair time we have, because we can only squeeze a person in on this day or this day for that many hours of treatment. And it's like a weird game of Tetris. And so it's a lot to keep track of. And then sometimes patients are like, oh, but you gave me this last time, but you're switching it to me this time. I was like, yes, because January 1st happened and your insurance company no longer wants you to get the once a day blood thinner. Now they want you to get the twice a day blood thinner. And they're like, but is it different? I was like, no, it's like Pepsi and Coke, but it's like Pepsi you drink once a day and Coke you drink twice a day. But it's just more annoying for you to drink the Coke twice a day.
I'll bet. Well, and again, you guys clearly have big old brains, because I don't know how you can keep track of it all. I don't know how you can. It's wild. It's just so much. There's too much. It's just bananas. But we're going to wrap up here. Again, gang, the whole reason that I was sitting down with Kathryn and Riya was to talk about their awesome book, The Romance RX. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Kindle. You can find it at Barnes & Noble. And it's what I love is that you guys, very much like me, you don't give everything away. So it looks like the author of the book is Kathryn Riya, because that's how you have it on the cover, which I love. So you still kind of, you keep your identities and nobody needs to know your business. I really respect that about you. So The Romance RX by Kathryn Riya, search for it anywhere you get your books. And I hope you all buy them, because it is a good book. And I'm looking forward
to it. It's on sale right now.
It's on sale right now.
How fortuitously timed.
And you have to read it before the sequel comes out.
Because we're working on one.
And I'll have you back to talk about that. It'll be great. But again, so Kathryn and Riya, thank you so much. I know we covered a lot of things, and it's because I'm just so fascinated by all of it. And I'm also very, very impressed by people like you who have such big brains. So I do thank you for taking the time. Again, Kathryn, even being on call, I really do appreciate you guys sitting down with me and
I didn't get
talking
paid
about all
once.
this stuff.
Maybe you're her good luck charm. Maybe she needs to be with you every time she's on call.
Yes. Yeah. Let's get a video chat going on those nights. You let me know. So this was Try Not to Curse, my friends, and we will catch you next time.